Hello and welcome back to Sports Talk with Dad. This is a show where we talk about sports based on our own generational perspectives. My name is Kyle, and I couldn't call this Sports Talk with Dad without the man sitting next to me, a man who was alive when dirt was new, my dad, Tim.
Hey everybody, I always wonder what you're going to say at that point.
It's one of my favorite parts of the show, I'm not going to lie.
So we finished our first 18-week NFL season and ended it with maybe the greatest game of the year.
What a game.
Oh my,
Good for the Raiders for going for the win. They could have taken a knee and still gotten the playoffs, and they decided they were going to win the game.
Al Davis is looking down and is very proud for them going for the win.
That he is.
So, but we're going into the playoffs now, which I'm very excited about. And you can get analytics from any place else. We wanted to come up with a way to pick our winners, and we decided to pick our winners and losers based on each franchise's Mount Rushmores.
Yeah, and we have a little caveat. You can only pick one quarterback, so you have to pick a quarterback, and you can only pick one. So you can't pick Brett Favre, Bart Starr, and Aaron Rodgers to be on your Mount Rushmore for the Packers. You can only pick one of those quarterbacks, and you have to pick a defensive player as well. So you can have a quarterback and two offensive weapons, or you can have a quarterback and three defensive players. That's the only two caveats we had on this list.
And I added one, though. I decided that you could only have one player per franchise. So
Right.
Tom Brady can't be on the Bucks and the Patriots. Reggie White can't be on the Eagles and the Packers.
I tried. I struggled very hard with one team. I don't know if I was able to do it or not, but I did do my best to follow that rule as closely as possible. Now, we're going to make two videos on this here. So we are going to start with the AFC. We are going to do the NFC and pick our Super Bowl champions in tomorrow's video. So make sure to check that out. But like I said, AFC is only today, and man, do we have some fun lists.
It's going to be interesting. There's some iconic franchises with very, very deep lists of
There are, and
players.
we're going to start with one of them here, which is the Steelers versus Kansas City. Talk about history of the NFL. I can't think of a better game to start with.
History of the NFL since the Super Bowl era, absolutely.
Yeah, even before that with the AFL. I mean,
Yeah,
these guys were putting up big wins, especially the Chiefs playing in the first Super Bowl. Very dominant team. So we're going to get into the Steelers here. We did go different on quarterback. Out the gates, we're different. You go Terry Bradshaw, I go Big Ben Roethlisberger.
I went with a player who's turning out to be one of the more underrated players to have ever been to play the game, and he's got 4 Super Bowl rings.
He does, and I think Big Ben's going to end up in that category as well. Both quarterbacks anchored by great defenses when they were winning. Both quarterbacks anchored by great running backs at that time. For me, seeing Big Ben make some of the throws that he made, I had to put him on my list.
You saw him play. I saw Terry Bradshaw play. I went with the guy that just made some unbelievable throws in high-pressure Super Bowl situations. I went with Terry Bradshaw.
Fair enough. Very generational difference on the pick there. Joe Green, I mean, we don't need to go into that. Anybody that's watching this show is going to understand that pick right there. TJ Watt, I am shocked that you went with TJ Watt.
You know what? I think he's going to be the face of this generation of Steelers fans. He's just possibly set the record. He's at least tied the single season sack
Yes.
record. Um, he's a dominant defensive player, and was an easy choice for me.
Fair enough. Easy choice for me as well. It breaks my heart seeing him in a Steelers uniform. I mean, this is a man that should have been a Green Bay Packer, but Ted Thompson had to give us his little parting gift of trading back. For those of you that don't know, by the way, the TJ Watt was on the board when the Packers were picking, and we decided to trade back instead and draft Kevin King, who's a good player.
Good player, but he's not going to be the Hall of Fame
He's not
player
TJ Watt.
as
We
TJ
we
Watt.
let TJ leave Wisconsin, which we never should have done. It hurts not to see him in green and gold, but congratulations on at least tying the sack record
Right.
this year. We did go different when it comes to player 3. I went Troy Polamalu. I had to. I mean, just watching him play as one of the greatest defensive players I've ever seen play the game. The man with the hair who has some of the greatest commercials I've ever seen. I had to go that route. You go different. You go Mike Webster.
And look, Troy Polamalu was on my short list. I went with maybe, and certainly on the very short list of the greatest centers of all time, Mike Webster was an easy choice for me.
Fair enough. I can't argue that pick. When it comes to Kansas City, we did go different on quarterbacks as well. You go Len Dawson, I go Patrick Mahomes.
I thought of Mahomes, obviously, but I just don't think he's done it long enough. Len Dawson is a Hall of Fame quarterback, the leader of those early Chiefs teams.
Yeah.
I gave the edge to him.
I don't blame you for the pick. For me, Patrick Mahomes has done just as much as Len Dawson did in his whole career already, and I think he's just going to continue to do that going forward. Defensive side, Derek Thomas, we don't really need to go too much into detail on him, just like Joe Green, it's pretty
Right,
obvious.
right.
Tony Gonzalez, I think, is the same thing, greatest tight end of all time, both on our list. Player number 4, I go Priest Holmes, you go Buck Buchanan.
Again, I'm going back to the most dominant defenses I saw when I was a kid. Uh, Buck Buchanan, I also thought about Bobby Bell. I went with Buchanan just because he epitomized that Hank Stram tough shutdown defense. Easy choice.
Fair enough. It was an easy choice for me as well. Priest Holmes, one of the greatest running backs I've seen play the game. A back I feel bad for. He is very much a tweener between generations. You know, when he first started, Emmitt Smith was going for the all-time rushing record, so everybody's talking about that. And then later in his career, you have LaDainian Tomlinson and Sean Alexander breaking their records, and Priest Holmes is just left there on a bad Chiefs team, not getting the love he really should have.
I considered him again. He was another one that was on the short list, um, but I'm going to default to one of the greatest defensive players I could think of.
Understandable. The big question is which of the 4 players on each team do you pick to win?
As great as the Steelers were, I gave the edge to the Chiefs. I think Len Dawson would think his way around the defenses and find a way to win. I think it might come down to a Jan Stenerud field goal in the end, but I went Chiefs.
It was hard pick. I think you're right. I think it's a low scoring game, no matter which way you go. I had to go Steelers. I just think that the 3 defensive players are going to lock down anybody on the Chiefs, and Ben's going to be able to make the plays to win the game.
Fair enough.
Next game, another good one. Now, one that's probably going to have more recent inductees on this list for the Mount Rushmore for both of us. A lot of their success has been more recent. Patriots versus Bills.
Both great franchises, but again, their success has been more recent.
It has, and it's no doubt that we're going to put Tom Brady as our
Sure.
quarterback. He's the greatest of all time, more Super Bowls than anybody else. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that. When it comes to defense, I had to go Ty Law. He's one of the greatest corners I've seen play the game. I think definitely belongs on that Mount Rushmore. You go Andre Tippett.
Andre Tippett was again another one of those dominant defensive players on Patriot teams that weren't what they have been the last 20 years or so. Um, for me, Tippett was just awesome and deserves to be on the list.
Both of us go Rob Gronkowski, much with the Tony Gonzalez
Right.
conversation. One of the best is what
Easy
he's
pick.
done. Player 4, I went Randy Moss, but I did take a lot of time thinking about John Hanna on my list, and that's who you went with.
I did, and I went with John Hanna because, again, similar to Mike Webster, just one of the greatest offensive linemen to have ever played the game. It was a man among boys at times watching him play. Um, for me, it was an easy choice.
Yeah, see, and I think that with Randy Moss too, when I started thinking more about what he did when he was a Patriot with Tom Brady and the records he set, I had to have him on this list.
I don't think of Randy Moss as a Patriot. I think of him as a Viking, so I couldn't even consider him.
I do too, and if the Vikings would have made it and we're following the 1 player per franchise rule, John Hanna definitely goes on my list for the Patriots, but the Vikings didn't make it, so I was allowed to cheat in this case
Fair
and put him
enough.
on the list. All right, now it comes to the Bills. Both of us picked Jim Kelly. I do think Josh Allen will at some point supplant Jim Kelly on my list if he
Oof.
continues the route he's going.
It's going to be really tough. Jim Kelly got his team to the Super Bowl 4 straight times, and if it weren't for wide right, he'd have his win. Jim Kelly was just an unbelievably great quarterback, one of the all-time greats. Certainly, I'd put him in my top 10.
I can't argue with it. He's on my list too. I'm just saying we'll see what Josh Allen does
Sure.
because I think he has a chance to do some more. Bruce Smith, again, a defensive player we really don't need to discuss. Leader in sacks all time, unbelievable defensive player. The next 2 we did go very different. So I go Stefan Diggs for my player at number 3. Watching him as a wide receiver, I mean, he just finds ways to get open and doesn't drop the ball.
No, and he was a great player. Um, I couldn't go with him for my choice though.
You got OJ Simpson on the list.
I know there's going to be a lot of controversy about this, but I had to go with the first man to ever break 2,000 yards. He was just an unbelievably great running back. Easy choice.
Yeah, it killed me not to put him on my list, but I had to leave him off. And my player number 4 is Andre Reed, a guy who was a cornerstone of those Bills teams that you mentioned got to 4 straight Super Bowls. I couldn't leave him off. You go with a player I've never heard of before in Steve Tasker.
Steve Tasker may be the greatest special teams player to have ever lived. Um, I was going through the list of the great Bills. I saw Tasker, and I thought, you know what? He's got to be included. He should. He's a borderline Hall of Fame player just for what he did on the special teams. He was a wide receiver as well, but boy, he was fun to watch on special teams.
Fair enough. Now the big question is, we got 4 versus 4. Who's your winner?
Again, I'm going to go to the side of the Buffalo Bills. A little bit different, maybe, but I think their Mount Rushmore in the end is going to be the greater of the two.
Understandable. I couldn't make that call. I had to go New England Patriots. They're my choice for a winner here. Going on to the next game, we have Raiders and Bengals.
Two, well, in the case of the Raiders, a great franchise. Um, the Bengals were never really that good as you were going up, so I think it might have been. I don't know if you had trouble picking your players or not, but we'll see when we get there.
I had a very hard time picking Bengals players. I had to do some research and put some people on my list that I had never heard of before. So I'm going to be relying on you to explain what these
All right,
players did. But starting with the Raiders, a little bit easier to find great players here. Ken Stabler, obvious choice. I wanted to put Derek Carr here, but he hasn't won anything yet. So I had to go with Ken Stabler.
it's going to take a long time for Derek Carr to pass Ken Stabler in the eyes of any Raiders fan or
Yep.
anybody that watched those teams back in the day. I mean, Ken Stabler, he was the guy that epitomized cool back in those days. He studied his playbook in a bar, having a beer. Um, he just was the Raiders.
Yeah, he lived that North Dallas 40 lifestyle for
Yes, he
sure.
did.
When it comes to defense, another time where we're not really arguing defense. Howie Long makes perfect sense. Not really much to talk about here. The next two, we went very different directions. Your player 3 was Fred Biletnikoff.
One of the greatest wide receivers. He was the wide receiver when I was growing up. He ran the routes very well, and he caught absolutely everything that was thrown at him with or without stickum.
Yeah, I know. Just to show a backstory on this one, when I was growing up playing catch, my dad never stopped talking about Fred Biletnikoff. He taught me if it hits your hands, you catch the ball. He made me watch film on this guy. I remember once I caught a ball and actually broke my rib catching a ball, and his first response was not, "Are you okay?" It was, "Did you catch the ball?" And I did. And then he was worried about me. I still don't think if I drop the ball, he takes me to the hospital. But luckily, we don't have to find out. What
I,
you did not tell me that I learned later in life is that I had to catch the ball with my normal hands. Fred Biletnikoff used 10 pounds of stickum.
he would have caught the ball with or without stickum, but it wasn't. He was just a substance that was there to kind of help him along.
Fair enough. I had to go Gene Upshaw, one of the greatest offensive linemen to play the game, not only as a player, but as a player union representative. Did a lot for football and changed the game.
Look, that's a great choice. Head of the players' union, got him through some very tumultuous times. Not arguing with that pick at all.
My fourth pick, I thought was an obvious pick. I thought it was going to be on both of our list. I went Tim Brown, an unbelievable receiver in the Raiders organization. You went very different.
I went with the greatest punter to have ever played the game, the first punter that was actually a weapon for the defense where he could set the other team way, way back. Ray Guy was I thought was going to be an easy choice for you as well. I was surprised you didn't pick him.
I'm not arguing with it. I had to go with the actual offensive weapon versus a punter. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I couldn't put a punter on my list.
I got it. I got it.
Now with the Bengals, this is the one where I struggled. So starting with quarterbacks, I went Carson Palmer. Let me explain my pick a little bit here. Carson Palmer had a horrific injury in the playoffs where his knee was almost ripped off. He had to have a cadaver ligament put in and had to go through a lot to get back on the field. I think without that injury, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's why he's my choice. You went different. You went the quarterback of the 80s, Ken Anderson.
Look, I went with a guy who was really the first quarterback to play on the West Coast offense under Bill Walsh. Uh, I think he's replaced Jerry Kramer as the greatest player not in the Hall of Fame at this point. Um, Led the team to the Super Bowl, lost to the 49ers coincidentally, but I just think Ken Anderson is the quarterback for that franchise.
I understand he was almost my pick. Defense, again, similar choices. The difference here is, and don't hate me, Bengals fans, I had no idea who this guy was. Tim Krumrie.
Tim Krumrie, former Wisconsin Badgers, uh, great nose tackle for a long time on those Bengals teams, and he's a guy I think of when I think of Bengals defenses.
After looking at his stats, it makes sense.
Yeah,
It does. It's just a guy I hadn't heard of. And then shame on me, because obviously he was one of the greatest players to play in Bengals history. Number three, the only Bengals Hall of Famer. You have to put Anthony Munoz on the list. No
probably the
questions.
greatest offensive lineman to have ever played.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. And then player four, Chad Johnson dash Ocho Cinco. He's on both of our list. Again, I had to dig, but man, was Chad Johnson good
He
during his
was
run.
unbelievably good. He was one of those diva wide receivers that is out there doing some crazy things, but boy, could he catch the
He
ball.
could. He was unbelievable. Definitely the time of divas when football was really fun to watch
Yes,
because
it
you
was.
never knew what those guys were going to do once they got in the end zone. So the big question is, we have our 4 versus 4. Which Mount Rushmore are you going with?
I went with the Bengals.
That surprises me. It does. It really surprises me. I had to go Raiders. You're talking Ken Stabler, Howie Long, Gene Upshaw, Tim Brown. I mean, it's just, I just think a much better Mount Rushmore.
This is almost sacrilegious, and for me to say, but I think Ken Anderson would win the duel versus Kenny Stabler. He was
It's
that
a bold
good when he had
statement.
Bill Walsh coaching him.
That's a bold statement, but we got through the first round. This is our list, so we're going to head into the next one. It looks a little bit different, especially at the end there. We did not agree on who was going to win. You went Bills Chiefs. I have Raiders Patriots going against each other. I don't think we agreed. We didn't agree on any single game
No, we didn't.
at all. So we'll see. We still have the Titans left to see who we're going to pick going forward. So let's get into that. I have Titans versus Steelers. You have Titans versus Bengals. We haven't revealed our Hall of Fame list for the Titans yet, or Mount Rushmore list, I should say, for the Titans yet. So let's get into that. Quarterback Warren Moon, in my opinion, the most underrated quarterback of all time.
Warren Moon, eh, suffered at a time when a lot of people didn't think a black quarterback could play in the league.
Right.
Warren Moon proved him wrong.
Did.
Came from the Canadian Football League, came down and just dominated the NFL. One of my favorite quarterbacks of all time.
I love Warren Moon. I absolutely love Warren Moon. I think if he never went to the Canadian Football League and all that garbage wasn't going on back in the day, I don't think anybody touches his records. I think he throws for 80,000 yards. I think he throws for more touchdowns than Tom Brady could ever dream of. I mean, he was the size of Cam Newton with the cannon of Brett Favre and the brains of Tom Brady.
Yeah, he was unbelievably good. Um, no question, he was on my list, and is the quarterback for that franchise.
Earl Campbell, our number 4 player, obvious choice there. I mean, the dude just ran people over.
He did. He was so good. I mean, he was so good. He was on that Bum Phillips Oilers team. He was there during an era where they had to tear away jerseys. You could not tackle him.
You
We
could
talk
not,
we talk about Dylan for the Packers right now. He looked like a kid compared to Earl Campbell.
right?
Earl Campbell was a bowling ball.
Yeah, his thighs were the size of my torso.
Yes,
The guy was massive. Now that's the last two we agree on. Defense, I go Javon Curse, you go Robert Brazil.
I did. Again, going back in time, Robert Brazil was just an unbelievably great defensive player for those Oilers teams. Um, Had to include him on my list.
Yeah, see, I had to go Javon Curse. He was named the Freak for a reason.
Sure.
I mean, nobody could stop him in his prime. He was unbelievable. Player three, you go Bruce Matthews. It was hard for me to keep him off my list, but I go Derrick Henry. Talk about Bruce Matthews.
Bruce Matthews, part of the Matthews dynasty, great, unbelievably superior offensive lineman, um, Hall of Famer. To me, it wasn't close. Again, I like the lineman, and he was easy choice for me. He was almost the first one on my list.
Yeah, see, Derrick Henry is actually, besides Warren Moon and Earl Campbell, was the next person I had chosen. I think he's done more than enough in his career to warrant this. The Tennessee Titans today are nowhere near where they are without him. He is an unbelievably generational talent.
I'll give you that. I'm very Houston Oiler biased, obviously. That was a franchise I grew up watching, and I loved them. My brother lived down there during that time,
Yeah.
and it was just a fun team to watch.
See, I look at it and think in a time in the NFL where running is not as prolific,
Prolific.
thank you for the word. What you said, as it was back in the day when Earl Campbell was running the ball, we don't have single backs anymore. It's just not a thing. So for Derrick Henry to be doing what he's doing in today's NFL is very impressive.
It's a different game. I mean, the quarterbacks don't have the protection back in the day that they do now. Uh, could you imagine Warren Moon playing under the conditions that the quarterbacks today have to play?
He would have thrown for 100,000 yards in his career.
I mean, it would have been insane.
It's
So,
it's I would love to see Warren Moon in today's game.
oh, I would too.
It would have been unbelievable. So I have the Titans versus the Steelers. You have Titans versus Bengals. We both move on to Titans.
We did. I don't think it's a question on that. Take the Mount Rushmores out of it. I think the Titans are a better team, but even with the Mount Rushmores, Titans dominate.
Yeah, and this is just Mount Rushmore versus Mount
Sure,
Rushmore. Warren Moon is a much better quarterback than Ben Roethlisberger for me. I'm sure you say the same about Ken Anderson. And I
absolutely.
just think with the two running backs and you have your offensive lineman blocking, I just think the Titans are going to roll them.
I think so too. I think so too.
All right, we got our next game. We've already shown all of these and talked about them, so we're just going to go straight on to the picks. I have Raiders versus Patriots. You have Bills versus Chiefs. You go Bills. I go Patriots. How can you pick the Bills over the Kansas City Chief you put together?
I love Jim Kelly. I love the Steve Tasker. I just think when you're looking at the Mount Rushmores that we picked, and call me crazy,
You're crazy.
okay, fine, but I'll take the Bills. I'll take their Mount Rushmore.
Understand? I can't really say anything. I knocked out both those teams already with my list. I was surprised when I saw you pick the Bills over the Chiefs. I have Raiders versus Patriots. I go Patriots. I just think the list of the Patriots is better all time than the list of the Raiders.
Well, again, we've disagreed on everything else, so why
Might
not
as well
this as
disagree
well?
here. We're gonna get into the brackets here. So I have an AFC championship of Mount Rushmore's Patriots versus Titans. You have Bills versus Titans.
And I love what I have because I've got two of the most iconic franchises to have ever been in the AFC. I'll take their histories and their Mount Rushmores all day long.
I can't argue with that. I had to go Tom Brady and the Patriots, and I had to go Warren Moon. We got our AFC championships to pick. I put a lot of thought into this. It was a hard pick, but at the end of the day, for me, I couldn't go against Warren Moon. I just couldn't. I think he's going to win at all costs. I had to go with the Titans as my AFC Mount Rushmore champions. You go with Bills.
I couldn't go against mainly Bruce Smith.
Yeah,
He was the guy that I think would tip the balance on those Mount Rushmores, and that's why I went with the Bills.
understand. Well, there's our picks, folks. You let us know what you think. Comment below and let us know why you think we're crazy, why you think we're right. Like and subscribe. Let us know how the conversations went with your family, with your sons, with your daughters, with your fathers, with your mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers. We want to hear it all. Comment below. Again, please like and subscribe. We are going to do an NFC champion video tomorrow with our Super Bowl picks, so make sure you tune in for that. Any last words?
This has been fun. I like looking at the playoffs in this way. Uh, I didn't think we'd disagree as much as we did.
I am shocked with the way our lists looked.
I am too. I am too. But it's going to play out. We almost should have a bet to see which way these things go. Um, but in the end, I think I'm very happy with my picks.
I am too. I am too. I'm excited to put the NFC together and to pick our Super Bowl champions. Please tune in tomorrow to see the NFC Championship and our Super Bowl picks. Again, this has been Sports Talk with Dad, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.